I am Dr. Ruth Jackson, University Librarian at the University of California Riverside and the co-founder of the Tuskegee Airmen Archive.
Dr. Jackson, one of the questions that we wanted to ask you today is, what was your role and how were the artifacts brought out here from Washington, D.C. to University of California Riverside?
My role in establishing the archive was to serve as co-founder. I was approached by Colonel Ralph W. Smith, who was at that time the Vice President for the Western Region, Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, and he made me aware that the Tuskegee Airmen were dying fairly rapidly, and there was a national effort being undertaken by the National Park Service to interview the Tuskegee Airmen to capture their oral histories. And he suggested to me that other reputable agencies needed to become involved in that effort because we needed to step up the pace to collect their histories while they were still alive. That was a very fascinating project for me, and so after several conversations with him, I agreed that I would look further into the possibility and decided to accept the first collection, which was actually deposited by him by cleaning out his garage. He had been associated with the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated on the national level, as well as having been president of the Buford Johnson chapter here in Riverside. And he proceeded to introduce me to other Tuskegee Airmen or their families to begin the process of depositing the papers with us, in addition to making contact with the national president of the Tuskegee Airmen. At that time it was Mrs. Tess Spooner, who lived in Washington, and the national organization fully supported our effort, and so the rest is history. They were here for the first celebration that we had in 2005. That was the establishment of the archive, and they worked closely with us since. We've been designated as the official depository for the papers of the national organization, and they are still sorting through the papers to make a determination as to what they could actually deposit with us. But we have the records at this time of various chapters, in addition to more than 80 Tuskegee Airmen and their families having deposited archives with us. And so it has been a real pleasure for me to get to know the airmen and the women associated with the Tuskegee experience, and to have the celebrations to honor them on an annual basis. And with the annual celebrations, there are from 14 to 21 of them who are here each time. Many from the California and the Midwest, but they also come as far away as the East Coast to participate in the celebration. So it has been a real pleasure for us to contribute to capturing their history.
Well, one of the other questions I want to piggyback off of is, I understand that the UC Riverside is going to have a celebration sometime in November to help celebrate the Tuskegee Airmen. Would you elaborate more on that event?
Yes, I'd be pleased to. Each year we choose a theme. Last year's theme was Top Guns. What most people don't know is that the Tuskegee Airmen won the very first Top Gun competition. The Top Gun competition was made famous by Tom Cruise with the movie Top Gun, referring to the Navy. But the first Top Gun competition was held in 1949 in Las Vegas, and the Tuskegee Airmen won that competition. We choose themes that will expose unknown history about the Tuskegee Airmen, and this year our theme is going to be Tuskegee Airmen Heroes at Ramatelli. Ramatelli was the name of the place in Italy where the 332nd was stationed during World War II. And if you saw the Red Tails movie, that was the story of Ramatelli. And actually, the Tuskegee Airmen and the white bomber pilots that they have escorted haven't been together in more than 60 years. Last year, there was a gathering of some of them in San Diego. And our program is going to be an opportunity for the white bomber pilots and the Tuskegee Airmen each to tell their stories. As you know from the movie, it was a process of discovery for the white bomber pilots to know that they were actually being escorted by black pilots. And so our program was centered around having them getting together to tell their perspectives on what happened, how the white pilots became aware of what happened, being escorted by African American pilots, and what their reactions were, and to have the Tuskegee Airmen talk about their exploits in escorting the bomber pilots on sorties. My hope is that I'll be able to get the Tuskegee Airmen who shot down the first German jet to come to talk about what that was like. You know, people always raise questions about how could a propeller plane overtake a jet. Well, I heard him give a description of that at the Tuskegee Airmen Convention earlier this year, and so it would be a delight, for example, to have him here. He was at Ramatelli. And I also have been able to get the names of white bomber pilots, some who actually stayed at Ramatelli. That's another story that most people don't know about, and that is over 17. There may have been more planes than that, but a group of pilots, because of bad weather, had to land at Ramatelli, and that was the first experience with many of them of actually having to share accommodations with African American fighters. So I'll be exploring both of those stories during the celebration this year. And I think it's essential for us to have programs of that type, because the white pilots are also getting up in age and dying, and there's not a large number of them left either. And so we'll take the entire thing and entire program and make it available here in the archive as a part of their history.
One other question we wanted to ask you: why should people know about the Tuskegee Airmen and their history within the Air Corps, Army Air Corps, Air Force? Mm-hmm. Why should young people and everybody, why should they know this history? What makes it so important?
It's really important from various perspectives. It's important from a human story perspective, in that the Tuskegee Airmen experiment is the story of a group of young men who were able to overcome extraordinary odds in proving that they could do something that the military and other people believed that blacks were not capable of, and that is the ability to fly and to fight. They had to endure all kinds of oppression on the way to Tuskegee. Many of them came from the North and had not experienced the kind of racism that they had to go through just to get there. And if you come to some of our events, you will hear them talk about that. But the other thing is that after the war, the Tuskegee Airmen went on to do fantastic things. They were judges, lawyers, the first black CEOs of major corporations. The Fortune 500 were Tuskegee Airmen. They went on to be university presidents. My understanding is that the first African American architect in North Carolina to receive his license as an architect was a Tuskegee Airman. And when you discover their personal histories, not only in terms of how they became a part of the Tuskegee experience, but then what they went on to do with their lives afterwards is just an inspirational story of what you can become and do if you believe in a cause. And the other important thing is that the Tuskegee Airmen opened the doors for blacks and other minorities to get into commercial aviation. They laid the foundation for minorities to participate in space flight, and their contributions have been just tremendous. And that's one of the reasons that in our archive, we collect the whole life story of a Tuskegee Airman. It's not just the military record that they achieved, which was extraordinary, but it's what they went on to do afterwards. And I believe very strongly that self-confidence comes from knowing one's roots. And when you look at the Tuskegee Airmen, you think, what kind of backgrounds did they come from? What made them so special? And so gathering all of that information provides information to young people about opportunities in aviation, opportunities in science, opportunities in careers, and how if you study and work hard and seek to achieve, even though roadblocks are thrown in your way, you can do extraordinary things. And the whole national issue about getting more minorities into the sciences, the Tuskegee Airmen organization works very closely with educational organizations as well as governmental agencies to encourage young people to pursue the sciences, to become mathematicians, to become engineers, all of which contributed tremendously to the advancement of aviation as well as space flight. So they serve as shining examples of what our people and any minority can achieve if they believe in themselves and take advantage of opportunities that are given to them.
Now, I know one of the items, it was briefly shown in the Red Tail movie, the latest one that just came out. And I know a lot of information is not known about the mechanics that supported the ground crews that supported the pilots and the Tuskegee Airmen when they flew during World War II. Can you elaborate and maybe tell us what kind of movements there are to find out more information about the ground crews and the mechanics that supported the Tuskegee Airmen during the World War II, what's going on in that area?
Yes, well, the mechanics have been interviewed along with the pilots in the National Park Service initiative. The National Park Service did approximately 800 interviews, and we've been doing our own oral histories. But the mechanics were critical to the success of the pilots because they took care of the planes. One example of the importance of mechanics, they had to have a tremendous knowledge of planes and aerodynamics in order to keep the planes flying. The planes were kind of flimsy in those days. And if you've seen a P-51, you really wonder, how could this have been a fighter plane? But in any case, the mechanics were basic to all of the success of the Tuskegee Airmen. What they actually did was to rebuild the planes and to keep them in good condition so that the Tuskegee Airmen would be able to complete their missions and to do that successfully. And I realize that a great deal of emphasis is placed on the pilots, but actually it was the ground crew, it was the nurses. And the other thing we do is emphasize the women's role. And we have really brought a lot of attention to the role that women played in the Tuskegee Airmen experience, not only while the program was at Tuskegee, but when it went on to other Air Force bases, Army Air Force bases, after the desegregation of the Army by President Truman. So one of the best stories that I've heard about the mechanics was from Buford Johnson, who is local. Actually, he was one of the mechanics for the Top Gun competition. And he was also the first African-American mechanic to be certified to work on jet planes. And he lives right here in the Inland Empire. But his story is that he was being promoted very fast because of his knowledge. He was extraordinary as a master mechanic, and so he was up for another promotion. And so there was this panel that tried to trap him to block his promotion. And the question they asked him was, why do planes fly? And his response was, have you ever heard of the theory of aerodynamics? That was the end of the panel. I mean, they were just flabbergasted that he even knew about such a theory. And, but they had to have a great deal of knowledge. And one would think that a mechanic's job is relatively low level, but it actually isn't. Even in those days when planes were less complex than they are right now, it took a good mechanic to keep a plane in the air, and the pilots relied on them very heavily. So the mechanics are considered to be Tuskegee Airmen on the same par as the flyers were.
Well, Dr. Ruth Jackson, it's been a pleasure interviewing you today. Thank you for your time.
It was my pleasure.
It was a great interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. You mean I was that good? Thank you.
You know something? I was going to start.